Hi, this is your teacher, Amy Hughes, and I wanted to go over your first lab here. It's lab lesson 1.05. And before I do that, though, I want to show you in your orientation section of your class that at the very bottom of the orientation section, there's a schedule, and it shows that you need to have this lab finished by week 1. If that's not happening for you, you're going to have to probably reload. You'll have to put a new start date in wherever you're at right now and put the end date of the end of the semester, and then it'll reconfigure this for you to give you the correct pacing. And you really do need to work at whatever pace it suggests so that you can finish on time. So that's there, just so you know. Let's go back over to the lab. And you'll have, this is the lab itself, the lesson. My video that I'm doing right now will be down here. And then this is where you actually turn in your assignment. So let's take a look at this. We'll go into the lesson. And one thing though, before we do that, it's always good to read whatever note I put down here. It says below is a video tutorial to show you how to do the assignment. And please watch it if you're confused about this lab. So you're obviously watching it. If you're watching it right now, you've already read that. And then, but I just want to point out that you always want to read whatever's here before you go into a lesson. And then what this says is that these are the two Google Docs that I'm going to mention here in this tutorial. So we start off with the question, how do drop height and bounce height relate? And that's going to be what we're going to be exploring in the lab here. So you're going to read about, read here, and it'll kind of teach you a little bit about how matter responds to force, and you will look a little bit about matter and energy and how matter transfers into energy. So here's some goals of the lesson, and you want to take a look at that. You're going to be gathering data, you're going to identify a question and develop a hypothesis, and you're going to organize and analyze data to report, review, and discuss. You're going to look a little bit with graphs, and you're going to observe interaction between matter and energy. So those are some of the things that we're going to do in the lab. This is a good page. One thing, with the student guide, in the regular lessons, you can use them to kind of give yourself an outline of how to take notes. It's not super important if you're good at taking notes especially, but for the labs, I do recommend opening it up. So it's going to tell you a little bit of the background, kind of what we just read about with, you're going to try to determine how the drop height of, you're going to drop some balls from certain heights and see how high they bounce. So that's going to be what we'll be doing. And then this is real important right here, this these directions here, how to proceed. So always look for the procedure. Open the drop and bounce virtual lab. We'll see that in a minute. Click the view the tutorial. We'll do the tutorial, and it'll you would want to do that for any virtual lab, to do the tutorial first, just so you know how to move stuff around. And when you finish the tutorial, you'll click the home button and reset the lab. Now this is an important thing. You're going to actually do the lab, go to the regular lab, not the tutorial, and you're going to perform trials from drop heights of 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100 centimeters. And then you're going to record at least 3 trials in your data table. So if you're dropping something from 20 centimeters, like a golf ball, you want to do it 3 times and then just take the average of that. And you tend to do that a lot in science. You want to do a few trials and then do the average. Another great thing to look at is this graph interpretation guide. I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to click on that. If you have Word or some kind of document on your computer that would read a .docx document, then you can open that. But in case you didn't, I want to show you that over here I made a Google Doc for it. So you can open that up, and it'll just ask you to make a copy. You'll do that. And then you'll have this graph interpretation guide. And so we're going to come back and look at that later. You could look at it now if you're just working through the lab and you kind of doing it in order. So that's something you could do. The laboratory guidelines, I'm just going to tell you right now, you don't really need that. The graded assignment, another thing that you could open up, but I have also created a Google Doc over here. And this I would recommend using. I think it's good to work in Google Docs because then you won't lose your work ever. Okay, so another good thing to do is when you have your lab report or your graded assignment, it's kind of good to have it open in a different screen. So that way you can kind of like look and see what am I supposed to be doing while you're doing the virtual lab. So go back to the activity page. We're on page 3 and we've looked through all these things. And now we're going to look through, and again, it's just about dropping a ball from different heights and how high do you expect it to bounce. And again, there's that graph interpretation guide that we already opened up, and then the lab guidelines that I told you really don't really need. This is telling you that you're going to have 2 days to complete this lab. It says to mark this lesson as complete when you're done, but there's actually not a way to mark it as complete, so I'm not really sure why they put that. Here's the virtual lab. So let's open that up. And you can view the tutorial, but I'm gonna skip that right now. You should do that, but I'm gonna go ahead and begin the lab. This lab's pretty simple, so that's why I'm not gonna do the tutorial to show you that. Really all you're doing is taking the balls here and you're going to drop them from various heights. So here's an orange and you're going to drop it from different heights. Let me look though, before I do a lab, I really like to look at what the lab report is so I can see what am I answering. We already looked at the student guide, which helped us with our procedure, which is, like I said, down here. We're going to perform these trials. But let's look at the lab report and see what we're supposed to be doing here. Let's start from the top. So it says write the goal of the lab. It says question 1, you get 3 points for this. Write the goal of the lab or the question you tried to answer. So, we just talked about we looked at that when we were in the lesson, and it said that you're looking at you're dropping balls from various heights and you're seeing how high they bounce. And you're looking at the relationship between the drop height. So you're looking at the relationship, and I'm not going to type the whole thing, relationship between the drop height, how high you're dropping a ball, and how high it bounces. And you want to use capital letters, and Google Docs will actually underline stuff in red that you misspelled, so there's no real reason for you to not do correct grammar, and I do take off points for that. Which observations, experience, or lesson materials help you form your hypothesis? Well, it's down here is where you do the hypothesis. You might say, what hypothesis? I haven't done one yet. Well, look down over here and say, okay, here's the hypothesis, which is a prediction. Predict how your graph will show. You're going to make a graph, and it's going to show, how is it going to show the relationship between drop and bounce? Refer to the sample graphs in the laboratory to help you. Well, let's take a look at those sample graphs. Before we do that though, let's answer this question. Which observations, experience, or lesson material helped you form your hypothesis? So you're making these hypotheses about the golf ball, the plastic ball, the rubber ball, and the clay ball. All that question is really asking you, and it's not very well written. I did not write the question, but I want to help you figure out what it means. So it really means that do you have experience in life with a golf ball? Have you ever felt one? Have you ever dropped it on the ground? Or a plastic? You've probably experienced plastic in life, probably a plastic ball, rubber ball, and a clay ball. So you could just say, your experiences with each of the materials and how it helped you form your hypothesis. And you always want to make a hypothesis before you do your experiment. Before we go back to the virtual lab and drop all these balls, let's think about how the golf ball, the plastic ball, the rubber ball, or the clay ball will behave. But they're asking you to predict it by how you think your graph will show a relationship between drop and bounce. That's a little trickier. So let's take a look at these graphs over here. They give you a bunch of examples. Graph 1, it shows a direct relationship between, and you can read it right here what it says, between the drop height and bounce. So if you drop it from 20 centimeters, it's going to bounce 20 centimeters. And that shows And it even says right here that it shows that it's a very bouncy ball, a strong relationship between the variables. As the drop height increases, the bounce height increases. So that's going to be something that would be pretty bouncy. And graph 2, let's see, is that showing? Where did graph 2 go? Here it is, over here. So this is the description of it, but it's over here. But you can see that the higher you drop it from, it's still bouncing, but it's not bouncing as high. So it's not as bouncy. It would be a ball that wouldn't be as bouncy. So when thinking about those different balls that we were just supposed to be making a hypothesis about, the golf ball, the plastic ball, the rubber ball, and the clay ball, which one of these graphs do you think is going to be more likely to be it? Now, you don't want to write in your hypothesis that it's going to be like graph 2. You want to describe what graph 2 means. Don't write anything about it being like graph 2. Those are just numbered for you, but you want to actually use more of this description here to say, you know, I think that the plastic ball is going to have a direct relationship between bounce height and drop height. And the reason, you know, you also want to say why, you know, because plastic balls are bouncy or have a little bit more bouncy according, you know, from my experience with them, or the rubber ball might be more like that. Graph 3 shows one that, you know, when you drop it, it doesn't bounce at all. Are any of these likely not to bounce at all? And that would be more like this. And you can kind of describe it with using these sort of words here. Graph 4 shows the bounce height change with the drop height. Okay, so there's really no, this is kind of random. Do you think any of these balls would be more just random? And then there's a few more down here. This one shows that as the higher you go, it actually starts to kind of peter out, and it'll only still drop about the same no matter, like even if you kept going, it would still probably just drop about the same. Do you think any of these balls would be like that? Do you think any of these balls would, as you got higher in the dropping, the bounce got even more, you know, at first it didn't bounce very much at all, and then all of a sudden, the higher you go, it's going to really bounce. At a certain point, it says this ball would eventually bounce higher than the drop height. So, you know, do you think any of these balls would do that? So that's another thing you need to answer here. Now it says use the data from your experiment to complete the data table. Now let's go and do the experiment. Let's go to the virtual lab. And let's take a look, because like it said in the student guide, you want to do it from 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100, each one. And then you're going to put in the number, the averages. So let's start with the 20 with the golf ball. Okay, pick up the golf ball. Oh, you got to pick it up down here. There we go. And then you do at the bottom of the ball. So the bottom at 20 would be about right here. Let's see if we can drop it from here. Oh, it's kind of, let's move it a little bit over. And let's try that again, because the glove was in the way. I couldn't really see it. So that looked like about 12 to me, but that's why you want to do it a few times, 3 times. Again, that looked more like 13. And then we'll do it one more time. That looked like 13 too. So I would probably say, you know, I would probably add 12, 13, and 13 together and take the average and then put that in the number over here. I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop it from a height of 40. So we'll drop it from a height of 40. I'm not going to do that right now, but just to give you an example, you want to do it from 40 and do that 3 times and record that in the average. 60, 80, and 100. Then you're going to drop that off and get another ball. And you really don't have to do all these if they're only asking for those 4. They're asking for the clay. So you pick up that one. And if you click over here, that's what kind of gets you these arrows over here. So again, you know, you'd see that doesn't go at all. So, but you've already made your hypothesis. And you're gonna, and so you'll be able to see if your hypothesis was correct, because you're going to put in all your numbers in here, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. You'll do the plastic ball at 0. Of course, it's always going to be 0. 20 at 20 centimeters, how much does it drop? 40, 60, 80, 100. Do the rubber ball for all those times and the clay ball. Then you're going to graph your data, and that's the part I'm going to show you now. You're going to open up Google Sheets, and you're just going to create, it's pretty simple to create a graph. And just follow these directions that I give you, and it will be very simple for you to do it. So you're just going to create a new spreadsheet, and you can pick any of these rows. I'm just going to pick row B right here, and I'm going to put the what's called the independent variable here. And independent means that this one we've already figured out. We know we're going to do it from all these different heights, and that's a given. So that's independent of anything else. Now the drop heights are dependent upon how high we're dropping them. So these are the dependent variables. So that would be everything in this column. So let's say the golf ball had a, I don't know, let's just make this up, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35. Okay, so I'm not going to fill all that out, but let me X this out so I don't keep doing that. So we're going to do what I just said, 15, and let's take a look at that again, 20, 25, 30, 20, 25, whoops, 30, and let's just pretend like the next one was 35. Okay, so that was the first one. Now we come over here, and all of these, we don't even have to label them or anything. We're just going to put the numbers. So now we're doing the plastic ball, and let's pretend that that's going to be 0, of course, at first. We'll do 5, 10, 15. I'm just making these numbers up, so do not use my numbers. That's the clay ball. So that was the plastic ball. We got rubber ball and clay ball. Okay, so let's do the rubber ball here. And then let's do the clay ball. I'm going to guess this is probably not going to bounce at all. So I'm going to put a 0, but you got to check that out yourself. And all you do now is you just highlight all that. You click Insert, Chart, and you just go to Chart Types, and you just use that one, the line graph. And then you want to go to Customization. First of all, this is great. There's already zeros here. If you needed to change that to make that have a 0, you would put a 0 right here. But we just put a 0 there as your minimum. But we already have zeros. You always want your graph to start with zeros. We already got that, so that's set. The only things we really need to do is create labels for here and here, and make a title for the entire graph. That's important. So that's what over here. There's a graph on your report, but you can't use this graph at all. You can't overlay anything on it. You could print this off, or you could copy it on a piece of paper, and you could make your graph by hand and take a picture of it and insert it in here by using like your smartphone or something. That's something you could do. Or you could do what I'm showing you here. But the good thing is you can see what needs to go down here. So this is drop height in centimeters on the horizontal. So, and that's the independent variable, and that's always going to be on the horizontal, which is the x-axis. So let's take a look at where that is. Here we go, horizontal. And you're going to do drop height. Just do it exactly how it showed you there. Oops. Centimeters. And then you want to do your, see it put it on there right when I did that. You want to do your left vertical, which is here, and that shows bounce height centimeters, just right here. So I'm going to write the same thing, bounce height and centimeters. Okay, so there's that, and if you just click outside of that box, it'll show up here. And you want to make a title, so this is going to be drop height. I always like to make my titles like basically drop height versus bounce height. This is drop height versus bounce height, and that's what you're comparing. So that's a good title. Okay, and I think that's going to be it for this. One thing you'll have to do later on after, I'll show you actually, after we put the graph in, you're going to have to put what each of these lines are. So you're going to have to remember what the yellow line is and whether that's the clay or the and the different ones. So let's insert that. And let's go ahead, we want to title this as well. So I think I'm just going to highlight this, and then I'm going to Command C just to copy and Command V to paste. And that way, when I'm looking for, when I'm going to insert into my document here, I'm just going to, this is where I'm supposed to put it, the graph. I'm going to insert a chart from Sheets, and I know the title of it because I just made that title, and it's right here. So I'm going to use that one and select it. It's going to ask me again to kind of select it again. So I'm going to click it again and import it. And then it's going to put it right in there. And like I said, you want to put, you know, the green line is the clay ball or whatever it is. We know that the green line is the clay ball because that's the one I put 0 in for all of them. It didn't bounce at all is what I put in there. So, and then at this point, you can take this one out, just like select on it and then delete it, or, yep, delete it. Then you want to look and see, did your data agree with your hypothesis? Did these line graphs end up being how you thought they might be when you did these hypotheses? So that's one thing you want to do. That's always real important in a lab experiment, is to see if it all matched up. And if it didn't, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that your hypothesis wasn't correct, and you would want to maybe think about another question to ask, another experiment, and have new hypothesis. And so, and then you're going to use the graph to predict how high the rubber ball would bounce had you dropped it from 120. So this is only going to 100, but since we're in increments of 20, imagine that it went out to 120. In fact, you could make your graph go to 120 if you wanted to. If you wanted to go back over here, and if you wanted to click Advanced Edit, we could do a maximum of, this was, let's see, make sure we're at the horizontal, yep, 120. And see, we'll update that. It's not going to update it in our, we'd have to insert this one in. It's not going to update it over here when we've already put it in, but you could use it to kind of predict. Let's say this is the line for the rubber ball. That's the one they're asking for, right? The rubber ball, yep. And so let's say the red line is the rubber ball. Well, just pretend like this line goes out a little bit further to 120, and where are you at? You're we'll say that's somewhere around, you know, 32 or something. I'd have to look at that more closely, but that's how you're going to do that last piece. When you're done with it, what you're going to do to send it to me is you're going to click share. You're not going to put my email address in there. You're going to get click shareable link. You really need to put this in the Dropbox for me. You're going to take this and you're going to copy it. You can copy it like this and paste it into the Dropbox. I'll show you that in a minute. But if that doesn't work, because sometimes it's not working for students, you're going to have to use your keyboard commands. And you're going to do Command C or Control C, depending on what kind of computer you have. And then you're going to come back over here to where you're supposed to be, where it says click here to submit your assignment. And this is actually telling you how to turn in the Google Doc. It's basically what I'm telling you right now. And you're going to come here, and in the Add Comment section, you're just going to do Command V or Control V. And that's going to paste it in there. If you did this whole thing on a Word document or an Open Office, you're going to click that and find your file. Instead, do it that way and attach it, and then you're just going to click Submit. So that's how you do this lab. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I hope this helps you get through your first lab.